Morning. There's a notion I had, a theory, kind of, regarding Hollywood. It feels like back in the day, there would have been almost distinctive categories within Hollywood where you have the actors, and then you have the directors and writers. And the type of people who would act wouldn't have necessarily been allowed in the writer's room or stuff like that. And that to me kind of makes sense because it feels like the type of person who can act wouldn't necessarily be the type of person who could actually write something. They're very different skill sets. I would say maybe almost mutually exclusive to each other. A writer has to be, somewhat intellectual, good at abstracting. They have to be perhaps to some extent idealistic. Well, it depends on what you're writing, I suppose. But on some level, they have to be intellectual, and they have to know what the people want. They have to be kind of down with the folks, so to speak. Down to earth, I guess. They have to have some sort of commonality that allows them to write in such a fashion that appeals to the masses. And I think one of the problems with Hollywood these days is perhaps that those categories are no longer distinct. They allowed people into the writer's room that they never really should have. They allowed activists and perhaps worse yet, actors into the writer's room. And actors, well, they're kind of duplicitous, catty little hellions. They're hypocrites. They're backstabby, which is really good for being an actor. It means you're really two-faced. You're really good at putting on a performance for people. But that doesn't necessarily translate to, I can write a story that will appeal to the masses. If that makes sense. Anyways, that's my notion. All right. There's some videos to look at. Then we're going to look at the Peacemaker, I think, as a historical section. And then we're going to do a little bit of gaming. All right. Gesundheit. There we go. It's been a while since we looked at one of Dr. K, so let's do this. The biology of why men isolate. I think it's something to do with testosterone or something like that. Double check and make sure both of these are unmuted. You have to read it. Hey man, you look You look cute. You should smile more. Hello, lovely gentleman. Some sort of limp-wristed. You look way too good to be. Oh yeah, cashier. It's a little sus. Just saying.
So I don't know if you guys have seen these memes where, there's some kind of comic where a woman is getting complimented / harassed on her appearance, and then someone does a gender swap, and then dudes are like, yeah, this would be great. I'd be totally fine with this.
Maybe a little bit. It depends on what you're complimenting me on. If you're saying you look cute, please don't. Just don't.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about compliments. We're going to dig into the science of
At least not in that way, in any case.
What kind of attention men receive, what kind of attention women receive. And the really interesting thing about this is as we look at compliments, we will uncover some very crucial mechanisms that are driving the loneliness epidemic and may explain why the loneliness epidemic is statistically what appears to be worse for men than women. And it turns out that there are some aspects of biology, specifically the effect of estrogen and testosterone on oxytocin. So oxytocin
Interesting.
is a bonding hormone, facilitates the connection between human beings. And it turns out that estrogen facilitates oxytocin's action, so facilitates the formation of bonds.
So women just in general connect. I gotta switch this. I'm gonna be covering his face with my photo thingy. Alright. I hope he keeps it there. Every time. Alright. So, right. All right. Huzzah.
Whereas testosterone inhibits it, especially under periods of stress. And so this is kind of a weird
Which is a lot of our lives, honestly.
video because we're going to start with compliments and we're going to sort of move on to loneliness. So let's get started with compliments. First thing to understand, women receive about 75% of all compliments, men receive about 25%. The earliest research on this
Yeah.
started in the 80s, and then studies through about 2008, which is the last study that I looked at, it basically maintained this ratio. So first reason why compliments are core memories for dudes, they don't receive them much. So here's what's really interesting.
Yeah. I feel like women are quite often complimented on their looks, but guys generally, like, I think it's easier to compliment a guy on what they're doing. Like if they're doing something really well or whatever, like.
It's not just the quantity of compliments, it is also the type of compliment. So 75% of compliments that women...
Well, this thing, I don't know if it would really mean much if another guy said, you look really good. And besides, it seems a little bit gay. Besides that, I just don't know if it would mean that much, because literally, like, I'm not trying to attract other dudes, I'm trying to attract women. That's the primary thing, right?
Receive are on their appearance. Interestingly enough, the majority of compliments that women receive on their appearance are from other women, and the majority of compliments that men receive are on their performance. But
I was right. Booyah.
Complimenting people in today's world is
I'm the best around.
little bit tricky, because if I compliment a woman on her appearance, will this be perceived as unwanted attention or sexual?
That is true. Like, I feel like a lot of guys would be afraid of coming off as creepy. It's like, unless you're kind of a devil may care type of person. And that's the thing too. Like, it's just like you don't want people getting the wrong idea. This is gonna sound. I think women sometimes, at least certain types of women, are far more comfortable with men liking them, but not necessarily liking the men in return. They're far more comfortable with just being an attractive individual to people. And maybe some guys are the same too. But in generally speaking, I don't want to, like, give someone the accidental idea that I might like them. So as a general rule, like, complimenting a woman on her looks, I don't know if I would really do it a lot, unless I would at least be okay with something developing there. I would have to be at least comfortable with the idea of it, generally speaking.
Harassment, because I certainly don't want to do that. But on the flip side, how do I express appreciation for someone even if I'm not interested in them in a romantic way? Or how do I express appreciation for them if I am interested in them in a romantic way? And then
I feel like sometimes that gets kind of the wires crossed with women, because sometimes women are literally just nice, and sometimes a woman trying to send the signals is just confused with, oh, women are just nice like that. How am I supposed to know if a woman actually likes me? And to her, it's like, it was obvious. How did you not know that? Yeah, it's not. Maybe that's a problem of, like, the variability in women. That, like, some women, women aren't necessarily like other women. So what seems completely apparent to one woman that, oh, I would never be nice to a guy that I didn't like, well, that's not always the case with regards to the larger population of women.
we get to dudes complimenting other dudes, so there's a great example of this from a research paper, where one guy's like, hey, I like your shirt, and the other dude's like, nice, I like your face. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to compliment people and also how to receive compliments. So let's get into the type of compliments and figure out which ones are appropriate and not appropriate. First thing is we can compliment someone's appearance. So 75% of the compliments that women receive are on their appearance. The majority of appearance-based compliments received by women are given by women, right? So women compliment their other women's appearance all the time. Second thing is the majority of compliments that men receive are based on their performance, okay? So about 70% of compliments that men receive...
Well, I feel like that's kind of appropriate to some extent, too, because, like, men... I think they just, on average, probably don't spend as much time on their appearance as women. And maybe that's wrong, but it might also depend on like the environment. But it feels like just in general, women maybe tend to compete more on a visual level, men more so on other stuff.
Or on their performance. Once you enter a work setting, 68% of compliments that women receive are on their performance, right? So it used to be about 75% were on their appearance. In the work setting, they get complimented on their performance a lot more. That's a good shift. 98% of compliments that men receive in the workplace are based on their performance. So rule number one, if you are working with someone, you want to compliment their performance, not their appearance, unless it's a female-to-female relationship where arguably you can still get away with that. But generally speaking, don't compliment people's appearance in the workplace. Second thing, if you are going to compliment someone's appearance, a good way to do it is to take an article of their clothing or their hairstyle, one attribute of their appearance, and tie it to them specifically. For example, Dr. K, you're rocking that hoodie. So we're not saying that
I look like a hippie. or an ethnically unspecific inner city person. Sorry.
they're pretty. We're not objectifying a part of
He's rocking the ghetto chic look.
them. We are actually usually referring to an object that they have and tying it to them, making it special about them.
In that case, it's kind of more complimenting their taste, isn't it? You're like saying, "Hey, you have really good taste. That's a really good shirt. It looks really good on you," or something like that. I feel like that is kind of like it's a good strategy, kind of.
That you are pulling off that outfit is awesome. You're really knocking that outfit out of the park. You're really rocking that hairstyle. You're really like that beer gut is absolutely enviable, bro. Okay? So if we compliment appearance, don't just call someone hot unless you're trying to indicate romantic interest. You can still appreciate someone's appearance without.
Well, I feel like this is one of those things like I'm not saying like good strategies don't help sometimes, but I feel like sometimes with regards to like interpersonal stuff, you just have to do it. Like it's a lot of just like figuring it out, feeling your way through stuff like this to the point where you train yourself to behave around other people or be able to do small talk or interact with other people in a positive way. Because like during COVID, I think back was it 2019 or whenever that was, there was this kind of a time where like we weren't really doing a lot of social interaction. And even for myself, like generally speaking, I don't really like being around people a lot, but I'm not bad at doing it. But during that time period, it just became one of those things where you're kind of out of practice when it comes to just talking with people or just interacting with them. And for someone who's never had that at all, it's probably even worse. But again, I feel like sometimes you just have to do stuff like this. It's all well and good to talk strategies, but you just have to throw yourself in at the deep end a little bit. Figure it out.
Making it threatening or sexual. Third thing is men especially like this. You can comment on someone's.
Oh, that's perhaps a point to be made. I think sometimes rationality, like coming up with an internal model of a thing or trying to analyze a thing, it's good, but I don't think it's always possible, and nor do I think it's always advantageous. The overwhelming majority of stuff we probably do on a daily basis, walking, talking, all of this stuff is something we do more by feel or intuition rather than some like cognitive conscious process where you're thinking this through and saying this is what I am meant to do. It's just action, reaction, feeling your way through it intuitively quite often. That's my theory.
Possessions. Super safe way to give a compliment. That's an awesome truck. I love that grill. That's an epic mouse pad. I really like that pen. You can compliment someone's stuff.
I think I've never said I really like that pen to anyone. Well, actually, no, I take that back. There's one guy in our church who actually makes custom pens. So I probably have said, well, that's really cool or something. Something like that, I guess. I don't know.
And it tends to be pretty safe. Next thing that we got to talk about, because we got to do social rehab for the internet, is how to receive compliments. Generally speaking, the best thing to do is to appreciate someone giving you a compliment. So this is kind of like parrying a compliment, where it's like someone sends a compliment your way and then you knock it back by sending one of your own. And I love this in
Zelda or something?
video games, because there's this parry mechanic, right? Which is one attack is countered by another attack. But we don't want to parry compliments. What we want to do is appreciate them. So a lot of times what happens is we feel really embarrassed when someone notices something nice about us. And then what we do is we have to reverse Uno them. I really like your hair. Oh, well, I really like your hair. I feel really uncomfortable receiving that compliment. So I sort of reject it and turn the tables onto you. Instead, what you can do is appreciate their compliment. This is the right way to receive their positive energy and give positive energy back. Oh, I really love the way that you're rocking that sweater. And then you can appreciate that by saying, yeah, I actually looked at 3 or 4 of them. I wasn't sure which one to get. Thank you so much for noticing, right? You can say something like that. You can appreciate, thank you for noticing. I appreciate you noticing. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Thanks, bro. Okay? So you can just appreciate it.
Or you can do something incredibly absurd, like proposing on the spot. That'll make sure they don't do it again. Sickos.
Really good. Next thing is that if you do feel embarrassed, that's actually totally fine. So here's the cool thing. If someone compliments you and you feel embarrassed, that is their way of knowing that the compliment worked, right? You're not confused. You're not upset. They tickled you. They tickled your emotions in a really nice way. So you feel better about that. Now, this becomes really important because, there are tweets like this one where people will say, yeah, 50% of the loneliness epidemic is because dudes are completely uninvested in social interaction. And many of us as men are not taught how to compliment people. But the broader question still remains.
That's the way. I don't know. I think men and women just interact differently too sometimes. Anyways, you can look at the rest of this if you would like. The biology of why men isolate. Yeah, by Dr. K/Healthy Gamers. You can check that out if you like. All right, moving on. We got one by Chris Williamson where he's interviewing Erica Commissar. Good morning, USA. I've got a feeling that it's gonna be. All right. Let's do it.
Why do you think your work is seen as controversial?
Well, a number of reasons. I think
I can't honestly tell whether this woman's British or not, and I kind of want to know. I think she's actually American or something, or at least her accent is. I'm not sure.
some of the things I talk about, even though they're truths, they're inconvenient truths.
It feels like almost a liminal. It feels like a liminal pattern of speech.
My first book was about
the
importance of
I think she's American.
attachment security the first 3 years and a mother's presence. And so I think
somehow just like her look in general would have expected me to I would have thought oh, she's definitely British or something like that. She looks kind of prim and proper.
Originally when that book came out, it was...
Wait a second. Is this like his new setup? Because this feels more permanent as far as it goes. I wonder if he's actually got an actual studio, because I'd seen something on his channel about him getting an actual studio. Might have been some sort of live stream.
Perceived as a message.
Sorry. I was just looking at this in the background. I think that's from that famous painting, right? Someone trying to touch God's hand or whatever.
I think originally when that book came out, it was perceived as a message, which it really wasn't, which was an anti-feminist message that women shouldn't work. That wasn't
boo feminism.
The message of the book at all.
It's really empowering. Tradwifery. Getting a man to do everything for you because you deserve. No. To be fair, it does feel like that's a little bit it's almost perhaps in the way you look at it a little bit. Because some people would consider being treated like a queen, i.e. being like a trad wife, having a man go out and work and earn stuff for you and then bring it back and then, kind of ruling over the household yourself. Some people would consider that to be a little bit empowering of a sort. versus, no, I need to go out and do it myself. I guess in that case, perhaps the argument would be independence. Like, you can do it all yourself. But, like, no one's... I feel like the notion of striving for independence is kind of a little bit... Maybe the lines just get a little bit blurred between the notion of independence and isolation. They kind of bleed together, depending on how hard you try. Like it...
Rather, it was a message about the importance of a mother or primary attachment figure's physical and emotional presence as much as possible in the first 3 years. And again, that's a sensitive message in a society that says work, 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 everybody should work, 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 and no one should raise their own children. And so I think that's how I originally became controversial. I think I'm controversial in many ways. I think my most recent book is controversial in other ways. My book on divorce, which...
Much less contentious topic.
It is, but
Yeah.
it isn't, because the book actually makes the argument of this idea of 50-50 needs to be looked at very carefully, that we are treating children like possessions in divorces. So that's a sort of controversial idea. Yeah.
I think many people assume that kids are quite resilient. From your...
Well, I actually agree with that notion to some extent, but, like, I don't know if divorce coincides with that. That's a pretty profound effect, I think.
clinical work, what do most adults misunderstand about what divorce does to kids?
So divorce we know, is universally not great for children. It tests their emotional security. It tests their sense of permanence and trust in relationship.
Yeah, I would have thought the whole permanence thing would have been like a huge thing. So there would be this thing in theory that they would have grown up around, like, i.e. their parents' love for one another, and beyond that, being the product of their parents' love for one another. That's feels like that would be a huge part of it as well. Like, everyone wants to believe that perhaps the romantic nature of their own origin, their own creation, they want to be the product of something that is good. To, like, on some level, to hate the thing that gave birth to you, that gave rise to your own existence, is to hate yourself on some level. So I think people innately, they want to be the product of something that is positive, that is inspirational, that is good on a moral, like, aspirational level. And to have that thing broken up, it feels like it threatens that whole notion. Like, it threatens their notion of their own goodness. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit of armchair psychology. But it feels like that would have an effect on it. Not on only, like, the way you perceive your parents, but also on your perception of your own existence. All right. Enough blathering. Blithering?
So, one would never say it's good for children, and I certainly would never say it's good for children. There was a woman named Judith Wallerstein who wrote a book many, many years ago.
Wallerstein, Israel. Sorry.
Decades ago, about how all divorce is terrible for children and no one should divorce. Meaning the implication is you should stay with your spouse even though you don't get along with them for the benefit of the children. But
I suppose asterisk. In an ideal world, yes. But I think sometimes there are people who would maybe legitimately try to kill each other if they were together. So again, stay together if possible, yes. Separate, perhaps, if necessary. But yeah, I was like, as a Christian, I don't necessarily approve of the notion of at least divorce and remarriage, but technically maybe that's not obvious. A lot of Christians espouse those notions, but I tend to think that I don't even know where I was going with that. I tend to think that in certain scenarios, separation, perhaps, in a litigious sense, is necessary. But I think in the eyes of God, till death do you part. What God hath put together, let not men tear asunder. If that makes sense.
research that's come out more recently says that, well, no, divorce is not good for children, but there are ways to mitigate how bad it is, and it's that, in fact, chronic conflict, intractable conflict for children is much worse. So to live with parents who hate each other, so the ideal being two parents who love one another, respect one another, are affectionate.
Kind of like the pattern of the fabric here. I wonder what that is. It looks plush.
With one another, that's what's ideal for children. But if you can't have that and you have two parents who hate each other or who are in permanent conflict, that's actually shown to be worse for children's psyches.
See, I tend to think, generally speaking, you can make it work with almost anyone who's not actively trying to kill you. But maybe that's... I want to believe that's the case in any regard. Like, even people who you are very at odds with, just on a personal type of level, where your personalities literally just clash with one another, or you want very different things out of life, it feels like you can make it work to some extent, even if you just have to agree to disagree on certain things. But I feel like a lot of people these days, like, their remedy for conflict writ large, not just with regards to marriage, but writ large, is get away from the other person. Your conflict will be solved if you go away to another place and get different friends and get blah, 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 blah. I'm not saying it can never be resolved by distance, but it feels like, in general, you kind of have to be able to figure out how to make it work with that sort of person. Like, if you're an incredibly assertive sort of person, you have to be capable of learning how to make it work with a person who's not very assertive. You have to learn how to operate with regards to those people. If you're a very submissive person, you have to learn how to behave with very assertive people. Because there's not like a place in the world where there are no assertive people. You have to be willing to learn how to stand up for yourself. And the notion that you can just go somewhere else and there will be different sorts of people there that'll make things easier for you to exist and to be in harmony and to develop good relationships, it's kind of a grass is greener type of mentality, and I don't think it's, generally speaking, a good thing. Yeah.
Than a good divorce. So what I say is a good divorce is better than a terrible marriage.
Okay. Does that mean that divorce is costless if the marriage is sufficiently bad?
No, it's not costless. It's still going to test children's sense of security. It's going to test their sense of permanence about relationships. These are things that will test. It will test their resilience. One of the things I say in the book, which is controversial, is that you shouldn't divorce till your children are at least 3 years of age. If you can help it, unless there's some kind of abusive situation going on. If there's physical abuse or sexual abuse, of course you should leave your spouse. That goes without saying. But if you're just not getting along, then if you can hold it and put your children first for the first 3 years, because we know that the first 3 years are the period of, the greatest brain growth. So from 0 to 3, 85% of the right brain has...
That's actually really interesting. So, maybe I've mentioned this before in one of my videos, but I think there's a weird thing that we maybe have with regards to the notion of immortality, whatever. It's, I guess, purely academic at this point. But the notion would be that, oh, this person's 20,000 years old. How much they must have grown over that period of time. I don't know if that would necessarily be the case, because it feels like there would be a plateau to some extent. And I think I'd mentioned something to the effect that a 20-year-old will probably have much more in common with an 80-year-old than they would with a 3-year-old. Or an 8-year-old, or something like that. So it feels like, with regards to human growth, there's very much of, like, at the beginning of life, there's just this crazy amount of growth, crazy amount of development, and then it starts to level out. There's kind of a plateau. So it feels like past the age of, like, 100, I don't know if you would see a lot of, like, measurable increase in, like, self-awareness or, like, abilities per se. I think past that point, it would be more a thing of adaptation rather than, actual growth. if that makes sense. Like you, like past that point, it would just kind of that curve would flatten out pretty much to the point where like a person who was 20,000 years old versus a person who was 100 years old, they would be virtually indistinguishable, perhaps. It's kind of an interesting notion to think about in any case.
Grown by 3 years of age. And so you want to give your child as much stability and security and not having much conflict or stress in those years. So if parents can hold it for a few years, I mean, you were together, you loved each other at one point, you made this baby together, hold it for 3 years. Let your child develop a sense of...
See, I feel like the whole notion of people... Yeah, I don't know. Like, what makes you think it's going to be different with the next person? Like, that's kind of the glitch with all of it. Like, what do you think is going to make it different with the next person? If you can't make it work with this individual, unless there is some, like, incredibly unique sort of issues at play there, like, what's to say that those problems won't repeat themselves with the next individual? Because, like, even if you started out being very similar to this individual, it feels like the very nature of relationships is that you start to differentiate yourself, perhaps from your, like, maybe I should be talking about this. I don't know that much about relationships, but it feels like even in those scenarios, you start to adapt to the person you're with. Meaning, when you start out in a relationship, you might be at a certain place in your life, and you might be a certain way. But because your partner are who they are, and because their flaws are what they are, you start to almost adapt to that as well. You'll become different because of what your partner is. So, like, again, what's going to stop you the next time a person comes along from having that same issue? It feels like kind of a grass is greener type of problem.
Safety and security. And then if you have to divorce, do it after 3. That's what I encourage people to do.
Why does constant parental conflict damage children so deeply? What's it doing to...
Let me double check, because maybe this time I'm over top of him again. I think we're good. Ish.
To a child's system and brain development?
Stress. So we know that stress isn't good for children's brains. Well, it's not good for adults' brains either, but it's really not good for children's brains. So, you could think of what's happening to the brain is the brain is being architected in those first 3 years, and stress changes the architecture of the brain. So there is the stress regulating system. So the amygdala is this tiny little almond-shaped part of the brain that is probably one of the oldest, most primitive parts of the brain, and it is responsible for putting us into survival mode, fight or flight. It protects us. So we say that a little bit of stress, which produces a little bit of cortisol, can protect us.
Cortisol vaccine. That's the thing that's come out recently too. Isn't that raising your cortisol levels or whatever? I think that was a thing that was, at least I believe it was. I heard it was popularized by Clavicular.
Right, but a lot of stress, which is chronic, which children their brains cannot.
See, I think the notion of being good in a high intensity situation, like, it's different from being good at dealing with stress. Maybe no one's really good at dealing with stress, like long term, like she says, like a chronic type of stress, rather than like a short burst of like high intense situation. That can be, I think, perhaps good for people, shake them up a little bit. But as far as like an abusive relationship or something like that, or a relationship where they cannot resolve it into some sort of functioning type of thing, that is it's unfortunate. Because I think that I don't know if anyone's actually good at dealing with that. I don't know if anyone can deal with that like long term and be okay with it.
Handle.
Actually, you probably want to ask the doctor about this, but it feels like adrenaline in general is meant to activate in short bursts, right? It's meant for specific situations. You're not meant to run on something like that for an extended period of time.
changes the development of that brain so that child later on can't deal with adversity and stress as well. There's actually a researcher at Columbia University who talked about how, think about that part of the brain that regulates stress. It's meant to be offline for the first year, which is why mothers wearing babies on their bodies and carrying babies around, and then for the next 2 years after that first year, having them close by keeps their buffer stress, keeps their stress levels quite low, introducing stress incrementally. And then after that 3-year period, children can begin to integrate more and more stress. But if you overly expose them in the beginning, you get an overactive amygdala that sets that baby into survival mode. And then that part of the brain sort of fizzles out. That's the best way I can put it. It sort of shrinks, shrivels up, and ceases to be functional in the future to handle stress and adversity. So just basic.
I guess I don't understand what the ramifications of that are. Like, would they be incapable of going into fight or flight or something?
Not good for children.
Or would they just be incapable of regulating their fight or flight thing?
What sort of person does that make in adulthood?
A person who can't deal with stress, a person who's anxious, who's depressed, who can't regulate their emotions. And that's what we have today. We have so many
like
adults.
A neurotic personality type or something like that. Interesting.
Adults and young adults who can't regulate their emotions. So you could say that anxiety and depression and attentional issues are what everyone's calling ADHD, which isn't actually a condition. It's
EDHD. That
just a symptom of overexposure to stress. It's being in the flight mode of
ADHD
stress.
is a symptom of overexposure to stress.
It is. It's a hyper.
Okay, so I thought she said EDHD. ADHD.
Vigilant amygdala. It's when you're exposed to too much stress, more than you can handle, and you go into so you know what fight or flight mode is. It's our survival mode. So when we feel threatened or in danger,
like a threat analysis type of mode, which means effectively that you can't ignore anything and you have to pay attention to everything.
sure. Either our
makes kind of sense.
brains will go into let me fight the predator that's chasing me, or let me run. And so distractibility is the running part. It is the fleeing from something that feels threatening. And if you're in a chronic state of stress, then you're always in that state of flight, or you're always in that state of fight. And so that's basically what it is. But those are conditions of emotional regulation. What it means is that children were overly exposed to stress in the beginning, and then the consequences of that are that they can't manage stress in the future.
So is it your opinion that much of the modern youth mental health problems can be laid at the feet of dysfunctional upbringings?
Yep, that's correct.
And I feel like it's stupid that this is the case, but that is actually probably a very controversial thing. Like anything discussing like divorce as a bad thing is weirdly very controversial these days. Like how far we've come in that regard. It kind of used to be a thing that divorce at the very least was a little bit shameful. And I don't think that's wrong. In general, I do not think that's wrong. The entire notion of marriage is sickness and health till death do you part. The fact that you made that commitment and now you've reneged on it on some level, that's a failure, is it not? It is literally a failure. You set out to accomplish a goal and you failed at it, and to treat it like anything but that, like what?
Not
So, like, especially these days. Sorry, I'm cutting her off again. These days it feels like the twisted way people see it, where they almost like celebrate it, like, oh, you're free now. Like, yeah, you're free.
There's very little mental.
It's not a sign of. Yeah, I don't know. Again, it just feels like people like get very weird, depraved with regards to this type of thing. Where again, like you're celebrating the end of a goal you set out to accomplish. You're celebrating your own failure to accomplish that goal. Like what?
Illness that is genetically connected. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, there's genetic precursors, but there's no genetic precursor for depression, anxiety, and ADHD.
There's no genetic
No.
precursor for
Precursor.
No,
those.
but there is a genetic precursor for a sensitivity gene. And so what we found is a short allele on the serotonin receptor. So serotonin is necessary to pick up good feelings, but it's also a regulation gene, helps to regulate things like excitement. And what we know is that there are some babies who are born more neurologically sensitive. That means they're more sensitive to stress. And their brains are going to be triggered into that fight or
Just for all you sensitive Andes out there, sensitivity and perception, sometimes very hard to separate.
flight state more easily than other
You can tell yourself that anyways. You're weirdos.
babies. So if you ask anyone who has more than one child, you say, do you have one child or two children, maybe who cry more easily, who are harder to soothe, who you couldn't put down, who sort of...
Alright, put down. Just sounds weird. Now, for the record, I was very much of a crier when I was young, which I almost never cry these days. I don't know. Unless there's smoke involved, like if you're grilling something, that doesn't count. Or if it's really windy, also doesn't count. I'm not sad in either condition, okay? Not a crier. I'm a man. I'm a manly man.
clung to your body more, who didn't sleep as well, who had eczema and rashes on their bodies, who were more sensitive to the clothing that you put on them, or the smells in the air, or the sounds were too loud. A lot of those babies are
So
what we
they're autistic?
call neurologically sensitive or more sensitive to stress. And what the research shows is that
For the record, I've never... Maybe I should look up autism sometime. We could do a research thing on that. But the whole notion of exactly what it entails, you tend to think of it as being categorically linked. It's maybe almost a little bit similar to narcissism in that people just think of autists as being oh, they're sensitive to sound, they're sensitive to light, they're sensitive to overstimulation in general. But I don't know if that's that's perhaps one part of it, but I don't think it's the entirety of it.
those babies are given sensitive empathic nurturing if they're provided with a consistent, physically and emotionally present primary attachment figure in the first year to 3 years. Those babies, it neutralizes that sensitivity gene, so those babies can be as healthy as a baby who's born without that sensitivity gene. But if that baby is overly exposed to stress, if you separate them from their primary attachment figure, if you put them into daycare, if you treat attachments...
And that's perhaps another thing that should be remarked upon. It feels like a lot of people these days... They do the whole, having your children raised by someone else, and that might be just as unhealthy as the notion of divorce itself. And for the record, I remember being babysat at times, but, again, it feels like the primary thing involved there should be the mother raising her children herself. That type of stability cannot be bought or sold, or rather, you can't put a price on it.
Security with very little respect, the respect that it deserves, then those babies, it exacerbates that sensitivity gene.
Is this what people mean when they talk about HSPs, highly sensitive people, or is that some term that's just being concocted out of nowhere?
It's concocted, but it's so I suppose they're connecting it to the...
It feels like one of those things that a person who says emotional labor would use. I don't know. Just some sort of colloquial head shrinker speak.
The genetic... I don't know whether that term was invented.
So it's a term that seems like a psychologist would use it, but a psychologist would maybe never ever use it. I'm not for sure though. It's something that a person who wasn't a psychologist would think psychologists would use.
When they found the gene, but the gene has been found for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that those babies who are not provided with that sensitive empathic nurturing and that buffering from stress and that presence of their primary attachment figure, babies are born neurologically fragile. They're not born resilient. They're not born tough. They're not born capable of handling stress. They're born incredibly neurologically fragile. And so I always like to say that babies...
So, yeah. I would tend to think they're fragile in certain ways, but they're incredibly resilient in others. Depends on the scenario, because like you can convince a kid that anything is normal for the record, and changes or scenarios. If you threw an adult into that same scenario, like they would have a hard time adapting. It feels like kids are very good at adapting to that like type of change, but perhaps again, like she says, with regards to stress or things like that, maybe a different story, perhaps.
Babies have a fourth trimester, which isn't real because a trimester is 3, right? But it's that 9 months after a baby is
I like that. Fourth trimester.
born. They're like marsupials. You know, I was just in Australia and I gave a speech and I said, babies are like marsupials. If we had pouches, that's how they should be on our bodies for the next year after they're born.
What is it that's causing the issue then? If physical and emotional closeness are what's important, what's the issue with divorce if it's done amicably?
So the problem is that divorce demands that, well, at least today's divorce demands that parents are treated with a certain amount of, I don't know, gender equality or 50-50, you know, this whole idea of fairness, you know. And the truth is that what's happened is quite a good thing, which is that fathers are now recognized as being very important to babies. And they are.
Yeah.
But they're important to babies.
To be fair, I think like just statistically, if you look at, you know, people born in fatherless households, admittedly, like, there would be a selection bias there, because people who would have probably problems forming relationships, or rather maintaining those same relationships, would probably be higher likelihood for other stuff. But like just statistically, those people are highly more prone to commit murder. Well, I say commit murder. I don't know. I think any statistic you would look at would show that those people in general are far more highly inclined to do criminal activity writ large. They're far more likely to end up in prison, if that makes sense. But again, like, I don't know if that's a causal thing or if it's just a result of, hey, people who get divorces tend to be less good at managing relationships in general. They tend to be less good at a lot of stuff. And consequently, yes, the children of those people being raised by those people might be more inclined towards that as something. If it's just the action itself or the lack of a father itself that's doing it, or if there's other factors.
Different way than mothers, if the mother is the primary attachment figure. If the father is the primary attachment figure, then he's the primary attachment figure. But for the most part, mothers who give birth to babies, who breastfeed babies, who nurture babies, they still are the primary attachment figures. And so if you take a baby who's breastfeeding and is in a state of attachment security, building that attachment security with the mother, and is securely attached to that mother, and now the judge comes in who has no psychological awareness or sense and says, right, like King Solomon, split this baby in half, 50-50. Take the baby away from the breastfeeding mother.
For the record, that was, yeah, if you know the story, he was trying to reveal the true mother, I guess.
Who sleeps.
Interesting idea. I guess I don't know if like he would have actually gotten the true mother, but like it feels like, that whole story just is a little bit weird. But, you know, hopefully they got the right one.
Co-sleeping with the baby and give the baby to the father 3 days a week. And now this baby's traumatized. This baby has just lost their entire sense, the person that is the center of their universe and the center of their security. And for what? Because of fairness? Because the father needs to have 50-50? So the idea being, in the first 3 years, that baby needs the mother more than the father. That doesn't mean the baby doesn't need the father, but the baby needs the mother, if the mother is the primary attachment figure, more than the father. The cases that I've worked on where the children do the best are the families where the father has a tremendous amount of respect for that attachment security and doesn't think of his own personal needs or a sense of fairness or as if the baby is a possession. You know, the story of King Solomon is 2 mothers come in and say, each mother says, this is my baby. They bring a baby in. And King Solomon says, well, you both can't be the mothers. And so
not if you watch Star Wars Acolyte.
He says, guards, come over here. cut the baby in half and you'll each get half of the baby. And one of the mothers steps forward and says, no, don't cut the baby. Leave the baby alone.
I'm just like wondering, like, what was the other mother thinking in that scenario? Like, what? Like, we can both eat the baby or some... For the record, I don't know what the area that was... Like, what was going on there?
Give the baby to her.
I think there were scenarios in which they were starving or something that they may have resorted to cannibalism. I'm not for sure, though. You have to look that up. But man, oh man.
Solomon, in his wisdom, knew what he was doing. He said, you're the mother. Not the selfish one, but the selfless one. So parents have a very hard time when they divorce. For good reason, because they're in such incredible pain. It is such an incredibly painful thing to see parents go through. They're in
I was going to say, I can't, like, I don't... never mind.
such pain, they focus on their own pain and their own desires and their own needs and their own sense of fairness.
There was actually, like, in kind of going along with this, there was a weird thing, I think some sort of study. I don't know how reliable it is. You'd probably have to look it up. Where they asked effectively people, I think, who were divorced or whatever, like, if they could be happy for the rest of their lives, but their partner would be happy, they could choose that, or they could choose to be miserable for the rest of their lives, and their partner would also be miserable. Well, that is their former partner, right? And I think they kind of unequivocally chose to be miserable for the rest of their lives and allow their former partner to be miserable. Like that was kind of the thing they went for, which is it's kind of a sad commentary on human nature, that you would rather be in pain than have your partner be happy. It's like,
rather than focusing on what's developmentally correct for babies.
A lot of courts push for 50-50 custody. I've seen this.
Right.
What does the science say about that?
It says that I think the courts are not psychologically aware. I don't think they do it maliciously. But I think that they do it because of this whole societal movement towards we're exactly the same. There's no difference between men and women. And, all
right, based. We'll leave it there. You can check out the rest of it if you like. Why children of divorce grow into broken adults. Anyways, moving on. The Peacemaker. Colt single action revolver. It's kind of the most iconic gun in American history, so... Now, for those of you who aren't even into guns, you probably should still have your kids going to hunter safety or something like that. Gun safety. The odds that at some point in their life they're going to come across a gun is quite high. And for those of you who don't know, a single action is one where you can pull the trigger and... No, hold on. What am I thinking of? Single action is a mechanism that actuates the function of a range of weapons, including firearms. Initiates the operation. Because I always, maybe I'm getting this mixed up. I think double action would be where it actually can pull back the hammer itself. Single action is where you pull back the hammer yourself and then pull the trigger, I think. Alright. The Colt Single Action Army, also known as SSA, model Peacemaker M873 or Frontier, is a single action revolver handgun. It was designed for the U.S. government service revolver trials by 1872. It was designed for the 1872 by Colt Patent Firearms. As the Colt Manufacturing Company, and was adopted as a standard issue revolver of the U.S. Army from 1873 to 1892. The Colt SSA has been offered in over 30 calibers and various barrel lengths. Its overall appearance has remained a constant since 1873. Colt was cancelled its production twice, but renewed it due to its popular demand. The revolver is dubbed the Peacemaker, and is famous piece of American and American Wild West era due to its popularity with the ranchers, lawmen, and outlaws alike. Today, it is mainly bought as a memorabilia by collectors and reenactors. Its design has influenced the production of numerous other models from other companies. The original like the barrel issued by the U.S. Cavalry was 7.5 inches, 19 centimeters with an overall length of 13 inches, 33 centimeters. Bound by the Roland White patent, and not wanting to pay a royalty fee to Smith & Wesson, Colt could not begin the development of a bored-through revolver cylinders for metallic cartridge use until April 4th, 1869. For the design, Colt turned two of its best engineers, William Mason and Charles Brickenhoff Richards, who had developed a number of revolvers and black powder conversions for the company. Colt turned two of its best engineers. Their effort was designed for the United States government service revolver trials of 1872 by Colt's Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company, and adopted as its standard military service revolver. Production began in 1873 with the single-action Army model. 1873. Dang it. Also referred to as the new model Army metallic cartridge revolving pistol. Wow, that's a mouthful. The first production of the single-action Army serial number. I have to look that up. Single action versus double action. I'm pretty sure double action means you can pull the trigger and it pops the hammer back and fires it. There's a single action where you pull the hammer back yourself. Action versus single. Single action triggers only release of the precocked hammer. Yes. Booyah! Technically that's an AI answer, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Its only action is drop. The only trigger action. The only action the trigger activates is dropping the hammer. That's single action. It's probably the result, or it's probably the origin of the notion of well, technically, just double action pistols in general. Like the trigger pull on those things is ridiculously heavy because obviously you have to pull the hammer back and fire it, not just pull the hammer back yourself and then fire it. The first production serial number one, thought lost for many years after its production, was found in a barn in Nashua, New Hampshire, in the early 1900s. This gun was chambered in .44 Smith & Wesson, a center-fire design containing a charge of up to 40 grains of fine-grain black powder and 250 grain 16-gram blunt round-nose bullet. Relative to period cartridges and most later handgun rounds, it was quite powerful in its full loading. I think that has to do with the amount of powder in it. The Colt single-action revolver, the Colt single-action Army revolver, along with the 1870 and 1875 Smith & Wesson American Schofield revolvers, replaced the Colt 1860 Army percussion revolver. The Colt quickly gained favor over the Smith & Wesson and remained the primary U.S. military sidearm until 1892. That's a goodly run, I imagine. When it was replaced by the .38 long Colt caliber Colt model 1892, a double-action revolver with a swing-out cylinder. By the end of, for the record, I think swing-out cylinders would probably be easier to reload. images of what this would look like. Huh. Yeah. That would be the idea anyways. So you could just pop the end of it, and it would eject all the shells rather than going around individually and ejecting each one. That's a, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, an 8-shooter. To be fair, you'd probably only be able to have those in smaller calibers for the most part, given that the size of the actual chamber would have to be bigger for a bigger caliber. Alright. By the end of 1874, serial number 16,000 was reached. 12,500 Colt single-action Army revolvers chambered in the .45 Colt had entered into service, and the remaining revolvers were sold in the civilian market. First generation. Standard barrel length. It's kind of like a snub-nosed revolver. I feel like I would like that probably best. Like this is far too short. I don't know if I would like something that's really long either, but yeah, that's kind of a nice length. Alright, let's go with military use here. Alright. All original good condition U.S. cavalry and artillery single-action armies, those produced between 1873 and 1891, are considered highly sought after by collectors. Examples bearing OWA, Orville Wood Answorth, inspection marks, and the comparatively rare Henry Nettleson expected single-action army revolver Colts have been reported to command prices exceeding $10,000, depending on the condition and preference. The OWA Colt revolver refers to the earliest single-action army guns, which were inspected by Orville W. Answorth. Answorth was the ordnance sub-inspector at Colt Factory for the first 13 months of October 1873 to November 1874 of the single-action army's production. It's Answorth who inspected the Colts used by Colonel G. A. Custer, 7th Cavalry, at the Battle of Little Bighorn. The number range of possible Little Bighorn Colts is 14,500 to 7,527. Henry Nettleson was the first U.S. principal sub-inspector in 1878 at the Springfield Armory, the second only to the OWA Colts. Nettleson Colts are prized by serious collectors. Both the Nettleson and the OWA Colts have a cartouche on the left-hand side of the wood grip. Is an oval with a line at one. Interesting. Strange, but interesting. By the mid-1870s, the Army had purchased a significant number of Smith & Wesson Schofield revolvers, chambering a shorter .45 round. Logistical problems arose because the ammunition was not interchangeable. The Colt revolvers would accept the shorter rounds, but not vice versa. For a time, the government stopped orders for the longer Colt cartridges and used the Smith & Wesson rounds exclusively. The Schofield was soon retired and sold to the civilian market. The largest group of U.S. Colt was expected by David F. Clark, his DFC cartouche being encountered on revolvers inspected from 1880 to 1887. During 1893, the .45 U.S. Colt single-action Army revolver was retired by the cavalry and replaced with a .38 caliber Colt model 1892 double-action Army revolver. The .45 single-action Army revolver was still standard issue to the infantry, artillery, and other branches of the U.S. Army. Alright. Interesting. Alright, let's do some gaming. This is irking me. I need to be at the correct side. All right, I'll be back in a second. All right, we're back. We're back. That's not what was supposed to go on. Give me a second. I need to find a new game here at some point. I'm doing Dream Engines, Nomad Cities for a while now. The sun in the sky, it's got a smile on its face. Alright. Let's see, this will be the last time we play this one. It's been fun, but the time has come, muchachos. Alright. Get some resource nodes. Unfortunately, we're starting at threat level 4 this time. How delightful. Alright, so we're going to start. I think we're going to want to take like one this way. Like so. Now, where did I? Oh, I did leave those behind, didn't I? I can always upgrade those pretty easily, I think. Ish. Alright, we need end of the line, Millicent. He says his name is Millicent Bystander. Alright, now. Yep, blimey. There we go. Now, like so. So that no wood is no stone is going to waste. Oh, no, that's fine. Huzzah! That should. Good on power. Technically, we're good on food production. Good on food production. All right. I wonder if there is some sort of thing that's kneecapping that a little bit. Now, I should probably get some defenses going here. Alright, where are the openings? One here. Ooh, crystal. Nice. Should get that running. Possible. Jackass. Alright. More crystal. Bloody sniper. Maybe I should build a wall. It's gonna be a great wall. The best wall ever. That's what they say. I don't know why they all went for the wall rather than the turrets. Oh, blast. All right. And I missed the other side, didn't I? Alright, I think we're good for now-ish. Kind of. Now, if I remember correctly, some sort of Capus collector. This is technically what we want, right? Alright, so we want Featherstone. What the? Still? Alright. What the deuce? Alright, come on. So help me. We're good. Alright. So, what the? I didn't miss the stuff on the bottom, did I? Alright. Alright, it's wrong. There we go. There we go. Fair. Probably could just look down here. Yeah. Okay, that's not gonna work. So. There is. Ay, ay, ay. Can I move this thing? Okay, fine. Thank you. There we go. Happy now. Oh, well, that's not the sort of thing at all. was more potent than the second. Alright. Yeah. I'm gonna limit say I have to get those stone walls up and running. Dare I say. Alright. Like so. Now. I want to. Is it pulsate? Yes, you need cavitas and crystal. Dang it. You need crystal, not featherstone. Alright, you know what? I'm gonna move one of these things. Yoink. Is crystal down here, right? Thought there was somewhere. There we go. Crystal. Huzzah. I hate you. Sweet. Alright. Rats. Alright, now. Let's go like so. Alright, now. Alright. Now, this is not the way I need to go. Yes. The crystal. Nope. There we go. Alright, now. Cavitas collector. Where are you? Dang it! I forgot about that. You need an actual thingy. I think I'd chosen this one specifically because there was cavitas here. Before I literally just thought that it was kind of like that tar extraction thing. Sure I have that other thing rigged up the way it needs to be. I'm going to turn this one to feather crystal. Alright, now. up here. Capitus, 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 capitus. Alright, let's get heal up a little bit here. I really should build some of those. Is it J? It's not the sort of thing. There we go. Light crossbow. Alternate weapons not assigned. Now, know exactly how or from where they're coming. There we go. Huzzah! I found you. Now let's get this stupid thing running. Now. Now. Wait a minute, no, I can't do that. They need, what's it? It's a crystal. That seems to be resolved. It's not going there, is it? It needs to go to something that's purely crystal. Inches of a hill. I could just move that over here though. Alright, let's go like so. Alright, now. Alright, now. Bring this down like so. Now. Carbonite. Hoorah. Let's see if we can upgrade this thing. Yeah. Shush. Yeah. Let's think if I can upgrade these without adding more. I think technically that still increases fuel cost, unfortunately. What the deuce? Am I supposed to have something that's refining? Carbon mix. Refined cavities full of energy. Is there something that's supposed to refine cavities? It's not a workshop, is it? Let me see here. So the wood, it's a wood warper thing. Okay. That makes more sense. Maybe, I guess, I don't know. Alright. Now, I have to upgrade his carbon mix. Yes, okay. Fine, great. Huzzah. But I also need wood. You insufferable wretch, and that's the one problem. I don't have wood, not on this map. Stupid little... Alright. Yeah. Well, that was a giant waste of time. So you need cabitus and wood and crystal. Cabitus, wood, and crystal on the same map. Alright, well, that's enough of that. So keep that one anyways. I might as well take off, though. Because again, I think wood is, like, is the one thing I don't have on this map. Alright. Well, I guess nothing's lost if you learn something. Get out of here before they get here. Hoorah! Alright. Well, thanks for watching that spectacular failure. And good day.